Zeeman. Zeeman has been involved in the information industry for many years, both as a vendor and on the customer side. He currently chairs the Health Information Standard Organisation, which we've got a few members of here, so he's the current chair. He's the best chair we've had, I can tell you that. He's the manager for information strategy and planning at ACC. He has academic qualifications in economics, IT and marketing.
Find the presentation.
Oh, right. So I've got to find the presentation. So Zeeman's presentation is read codes are dead. Long live SNOMED. Zeeman will explain what read is if you don't know. What are the current problems? How do we get from read to SNOMED? Zeeman, did you want a microphone or not?
I think everybody can hear me.
Okay.
It's okay. I think just one of the things that sort of crops up quite frequently when we start talking about SNOMED CT is that people sort of assume that it replaces something else, ICD-10 or something like that. And just to make it clear, these are two things which actually coexist quite happily with one another. The whole idea of SNOMED is to provide a lot of detail so that from a clinical point of view you can make a proper assessment of what the situation is. ICD-10 is a more granular kind of, or less granular in fact, kind of classification system. So if you're doing reporting and you want to aggregate things at a higher level, then ICD-10 is actually the right level at which you want to aggregate information. If you want the detail, go to SNOMED. If you want aggregated information, use ICD-10. So when we start replacing, we're not going to replace anything in terms of ICD-10. But the reason why the title of my presentation is what it is that we actually have a problem in ACC in that we have actually used read codes in terms of claims which are submitted to ACC. And this is something which happened historically. Read was the predecessor for SNOMED CT. So the standard that ACC implemented was Read version 2. Some of these things happened long before I joined ACC, so I actually had to go and do a bit of trawling and sort of find a bit of history about what actually happened in that particular space to be able to understand what the implications of some of those things are. And Alistair and I have done quite a lot of work in terms of analysing the read codes that are used by ACC and what the sort of implications are as far as that's concerned. So we actually have the situation that in going to SNOMED CT, it's not something that's going to be additional to what we've traditionally done. We actually have to migrate some of our read kind of coding into the SNOMED world as well. So it's something which is a bit of a different angle. Interestingly enough, read is named after a GP. In ACC we had a lot of confusion because we also used information from another organisation called the READ Group, which is spelled R-E-E-D, and that had to do with the durations or the expected duration of how long it would take to actually get people back into a situation where they could be independent after an accident. And that's actually caused a lot of confusion in terms of terminology in ACC. So READ is something which has been around since the mid-1980s, gone through a couple of iterations, and basically in the UK been developed in terms of addressing some specific requirements. And you'll notice that one of the comments in here, when we got to read version 3, there's a thing called clinical terms, version 3. And that is actually at the moment code tracking what is actually happening in the SNOMED area. So they're actually keeping the two in sync and basically making sure that they sort of align. And in future, read version 3 will disappear and SNOMED will basically continue to be the standard that everybody supports. So at the moment there are two concurrent codings that actually exist in terms of the same particular space. So in ACC we've had the situation that we've been using it since the 1990s. Also what happened, and something which I actually was only more recently became aware of, is that MSD also uses read codes in terms of some of the medical certificates which they actually receive. So there are actually two main users, and obviously when ACC uses some of these then it has a ripple effect through the whole healthcare industry, because everybody who submits a claim to ACC would obviously have to use read codes. So we basically have read codes as ACC. We currently have about 33,880 codes that we actually list. Now that's very difficult for anybody to actually use. And in fact what happened, and this is where you start getting into the practical implications of using some of these coding systems, is that you hand out a cheat sheet which basically has a couple of summarized ones. You hand them to physiotherapists and a couple of other people. And before you know it, you actually start seeing biases in the way that they're actually recording the information. And that's obviously something that we actually want to avoid. And one of the main advantages of SNOMED CT is that because it is a computer-based and supported kind of capability, you can actually get very specific coding being done without any of the biases and so forth. So it's not like you're actually relying on a human to actually sort of go and look up something. It just all happens automatically in the background. So the Ministry of Social Development, they've actually got a very short list, about 903. So that makes their life quite easier. But it's something that we actually have to bear in mind, because quite often we tend to forget that there are other people who also use some of these other codes and need to be taken on the journey when we actually migrate into the SNOMED CT world going forward. So, being an information person, produced some statistics, and this is actually where I started trying to find out what was actually going on inside ACC. And you'll notice that in 1999, we actually started seeing fairly large numbers of read codes being used in ACC. Before then, it really was not being used by ACC. But what you see there are read codes which were sort of retrofitted essentially in terms of migrations that happened to new systems and things like that. So obviously we wanted to keep things in a standard fashion. So basically read codes were added to some of the older claims. And obviously with ACC being 40 years old, you know, data goes back a long, long way. So what you'll also notice there is that the big difference, the table on the left-hand side, which is number of read and claims, the number of read basically refers to the number of claims which have read codes. So the claims which do not have read codes are typically the ones which come from DHBs, and they obviously code in ICD-10 at the moment. In earlier years they used to code in ICD-9 as well. So we basically support both. We don't really have a problem in supporting both of those sort of standards at this point in time. The second table basically shows you how many of those read codes we are actually using. So bear in mind that we have a printed list, or a list of 33,880 of these read codes out there, but in fact we're using a very small percentage of those read codes overall in terms of what we're actually seeing in terms of claims which are being submitted. The third table, which is in the bottom right-hand corner, basically gives you some indication of the sort of spread of some of the read codes and how important they are in terms of the overall claims that we actually see in ACC. Now obviously what you will see is that there are certain types of injuries which are more common and prevalent, and so what you will see is that 3 read codes contribute a very large percentage of the total claims that we actually have as ACC. So if we start talking about some of the migration sort of areas that we need to look at, then obviously now we understand what these issues are in terms of volume and capacity and things like that. Alistair has done an analysis and actually found that of all the read codes that we currently use as ACC, only one of them we cannot map to a SNOMED CT code. So that's pretty good. So we've actually, the people who did the job of actually implementing the read codes before did a pretty good job of sticking to the standard and not creating their own versions of it or derivatives of things that were actually going on. And that's really good news, because it means it can actually do a pretty good and clean migration in terms of moving from this particular area into SNOMED CT. So one of the things I want to talk about is, so what are the problems that we're actually seeing in this particular space? And I actually got hold of some email correspondence between certain people. I've basically anonymized the people involved in this. Privacy is very important in ACC, as you know. And so we wanted to make sure that we don't cause a problem for anybody. So really what this is saying, and this is really from a clinician's point of view, the first quote, really talks about the fact that the information that we actually request as ACC is really noise as far as the clinician is concerned. It's at such a low level that it actually is not meaningful in any real way. So, you know, you'll see comments here that they will not allow that information to be put on their records and things like that. So really we've got to do something which creates something which is a bit more value from an ACC point of view, and also from the clinician's point of view. Now, ACC is very interested in actually doing much smarter things in terms of the information that we're actually getting from clinicians and various claims that are actually being submitted. And I'll talk a bit more about that just now in terms of some of the current work that's going on in the transformation project within ACC. The second one is basically to talk about the problems of actually implementing something like SNOMED. Now, originally when I sort of came to New Zealand and found out about SNOMED and things like that, I sort of got confronted and said, well, we actually rely on ACC to become the driving force for implementing SNOMED in New Zealand. Because we use read codes, it sort of was the natural progression. Because read had to be replaced by SNOMED, we would basically, try and make that happen. But the reality of the situation is that it makes it very, very difficult for an organisation like ACC, who's a small part of the health sector, to actually drive some of these changes. The reason being is that ACC then has to go and negotiate with all of the vendors of software to get them to implement the standard. And in a lot of cases it becomes problematic because the benefits for the supplier is so small that you actually have to pay for creating this new capability within those particular environments. And that's the model that sort of prevailed today. Whereas if we go back and say, at the sector level, we start driving SNOMED as a standard for the whole of New Zealand, it becomes a joined up effort. So everybody benefits from what we're trying to do. Everybody understands what those benefits are. We are not causing any sort of dislocation in the healthcare industry or the healthcare sector specifically, and I think that's a big problem. And I think ACC has become far more aware of the fact that sometimes we do things without really understanding what the impact is on the rest of the sector. And so, by doing things which is in a more sort of organized, structured kind of way, we all work together to achieve the right kind of results, we can actually get the best outcomes for New Zealand as a whole. So that's quite an important difference, that it's not just an ACC-driven initiative, it becomes a sector-driven initiative. And then the last quote, which is really one, so the last quote is really about why do we need SNOMED. Even an organisation like ACC, where traditionally we've had the situation that what people think we do is we basically get a claim for a specific injury, we pay for it, and that's all that we're really concerned about. But essentially the way that we're thinking going forward is that we actually need to get involved pretty early in some of these accidents that actually happen, because the more we can actually start supporting what that person needs in terms of their particular situation, the better off everybody is going to be. So ACC has become very much more of a customer-focused kind of organisation. Everything that we're doing at the moment, and the whole redesign of the system, is based around how do we make things better from a customer point of view. And in ACC, we've defined a customer as being much broader than the traditional definition of a customer. So we see providers, healthcare providers, all of the people who actually provide the services to our clients, also as customers. And the more we integrate some of that capability, the better off we're going to be able to provide an end-to-end service in terms of this particular area. And that means we must be able to identify some of these opportunities for interventions in a fairly early stage. So the more detailed information we have, the better the decisions we can make, and the better we can support some of those things. So in our new operating model that we're sort of envisaging for implementation in the next couple of years, we've actually built quite a few points into the processes where we will start using analytics to actually analyze what particularly is happening, raising triggers when things have to be raised, making people aware of situations that need to be managed. And so SNOMED is actually a key part of enabling us to get the level of information that we actually need to be able to support some of those things going forward. So, as I said, so who benefits from all of these things in terms of SNOMED? And it really is everybody. Because the better information we have, the better services we can provide overall. ACC can basically get involved at times when it's necessary to support the people that need the help that they actually need. And so everybody wins at the end of the day. So by all working together, we can in fact make sure that this happens in the right kind of way. ACC is only a small part of the picture. We're only about 15% of the healthcare budgeting or paying for services, as it were. So we're not the big major player. But by working together with health and teaming up with everybody essentially in the sector, we can actually make sure that it is successful at the end of the day, and we can actually do the right kind of things. So ACC and MSD are dependent on READ. So we have a strong vested interest in actually doing these migrations. We will actually support some of these activities and make sure that they actually happen, and we do the right things for New Zealand as a whole. So, question is, when do we start? And I think that one of the things from a ISO point of view, but also from a health point of view, this is something that's been brewing in the background for the last couple of years. The international conference next year is sort of a critical point that actually allows New Zealand to, for the first time, actually participate at international level in some of those things, and get people inside New Zealand can get visibility of some of those things. So what we would like to do is to use that as a sort of a critical turning point, to actually say we have to put some stakes into the ground. We have to make sure that we do the right things as far as SNOMED is concerned and start putting the signals out there so that people understand what we are trying to do in the longer term. So there is a strategy, there is a way forward in terms of how we manage this particular situation, and I think by all working together, we can ensure that that is very successful. But I think the main advantage is that when we've done that, New Zealand will get huge benefits out of the fact that we've implemented SNOMED CT. So for me, it's not a question of whether we do it or whatever the case may be, we have to do it. So we can do smarter things. We know we're not going to have enough resources going forward in terms of some of the clinical skills in New Zealand. We're going to have a problem. Our population is getting older. We are going to have to automate as much as we possibly can around some of the services that we actually provide today. And SNOMED gives us the capability to support some of those things that we need to do to make New Zealand a better place.
Well, I don't know whether you noticed, but Zeeman touched on an enormous number of themes very cogently there. So I guess the thing is, we're talking about the fidelity of the health information, the patient information that's captured. That's very important to ACC. ACC spends $2 billion on health every year. The Ministry of Health spends about $15 billion. We're in this together as partners. Now, it's interesting that in the UK government actually owns read codes. They bought them at some point, they developed them, and now they are withdrawing them. So in the UK, you won't be able to use read codes from 2020. They'll just be withdrawn. And the UK government has actually made a very strong statement in their equivalent of our National Health IT plan that SNOMED CT will be implemented across all health services by 2020. So, of course, they face most of the same problems we do around implementation, but they've made those strong statements. And I can tell you that at the Ministry of Health, we're talking about making those same sorts of strong statements ourselves in the health strategy and the forthcoming next 5-year National Health IT plan. So I'm just wondering who has a question for Zeeman. We have time for one or two. Nobody? Oh, here we go. Great.
Just curiosity, what was the one read code that couldn't be translated?
Alex, did you do that? What you can tell us?
Well, it was something to do with pregnancy. So whether you class that as a health condition, I'm not sure. So I think that was at the root of it.
Well, some people classify that as an
So ACC is covering you for accidental pregnancy, I'm hearing. Zeeman, would you care to comment? ACC is covering accidental pregnancy. What's the follow-up? Thank you very much, Zeeman. I think there are still some bottles down here.